When the clerk tells me we are at 1 o'clock, we will convene this emergency meeting. We're not there quite yet on official time. Well, you can slide. We're trying to get as much social distancing as we can, so I'll kind of split this difference.
But these things can't move.
No.
Yeah.
We're ready? Good afternoon, everyone. I am convening the emergency special council meeting of Mount Pleasant Town Council on this very warm June 29th, 2020. It is 1 p.m. The agenda has been published. We are where we said we would be when we said we would be here. And I hope everybody is staying well. I hope your families are well. This has certainly been an unusual time in all of our lives and daily operations. The second order of business is public comment. This is item number 2 on your agenda. Your name will be called if you have signed up. Please come and speak. You may drop your mask to speak, and then the microphone is going to be disinfected. For everyone, do not take it personally, especially if you're the first speaker, okay? We're doing this for everyone to be cautious. Yes, ma'am?
I asked when I came in if there was a sign up to speak, and I was told no.
You'll still be able to speak. Yes, ma'am. And, but we will go first in the order of those who did sign up. If you'll come up, give us your name and address. Oh, I'm sorry. No sign up. Okay. So social distance and come up and speak. 2 minutes. Do we have the clock working today?
Yes, sir.
You'll get a cue. And please give your name and address in 2 minutes. So who would like to speak first? Please.
Come up here.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Kathy Tyler. I live at 1186 Waterfront Drive here in Mount Pleasant, 29464. I'm here today because I'm really opposed to the government forcing people to wear a mask. I think that it should be a personal decision. I understand that the numbers are going up. They're going up because we're testing, but also the deaths are going down and the severity of the virus has lessened. And I just think if people, for the most part, use common sense. And there's no conclusive data that shows that these masks do anything at all to prevent the spread of this disease. And so we're all walking around. It's just something to make you feel good that you did something, but that something is nothing. And I just feel like it's actually unconstitutional for the government to try and force us to do these kinds of things. It infringes on our freedoms and our civil liberties. And I hope that you will vote no on forcing this community to wear masks everywhere they go. Thank you.
Next, please. Yes? And I would ask, we maintain decorum, no comments after any speech.
Hi, my name is Andreas Katsanovakis. I live 1045 North Stand Drive, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Excuse me for my English, it's no good. I'm feeling fine with anybody who opposes the mask as soon as they sign a paper that if they get sick, they're not gonna get treated. I don't understand why we close the schools and they have the students having parties on the beach. I might as well send them to school. And I don't understand why the government don't understand that the mask stops the spread. I mean, I'm from another country that when the Chinese used to come, they always wear a mask because they knew about it. And it took us 6 months and get to this point that we can't even travel or go anywhere because they spread the virus like crazy, and we keep doing the same thing. We should have closed the country for 20, 25 days if they tell us that in 14 days the virus dies, and would have been a lot better than the situation we're today. I'm going to the supermarket. They tell you that you can go from one door, everybody walks anywhere they want. You wear mask, they tell them the arrow, follow the arrows, nobody follows anything. Somebody's gotta do something about it. Somebody's gotta tell the people. People don't have a sense. Somebody, the government or something, has got to tell the people, you got to do this. Thank you.
Next, please. Just come up.
Monty Grantham, 1240 Windland Way, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And I own a small business in May, okay? I lost everything. I had to sell 3/4 of my possessions, actually give away, okay? I couldn't sleep in a KOA because it was against the law. So I had to go way out to Francis Marion Forest to sleep. A game warden threw me out. I slept in Walmart parking lot for nearly 2 weeks until that $1,200 check came in. PPP didn't work. Unemployment didn't work. I make $62 a week from PPP. I finally got into a place. My parents still to this day do not know I was living in a Walmart parking lot. That's how furious I am. Spanish flu. All the doctors at that time said, at the end of it, masks were the problem, period. If you don't believe me, look it up. Hong Kong flu, 1968. That killed nearly 1 to 4 million people worldwide, 100,000 in the US. Half the deaths in this country from this disease are from New York and New Jersey, where our governor sent COVID-19 patients to nursing homes. Do you know what we had during 1968, 69? Woodstock. The generation before me, if they're so damn concerned, where were they concerned about the elderly then? Any doctor will tell you, if you have a cold, don't wear this. Thank you.
We'll go this way back, and I want to remind everyone, if there's any outburst or any comments while anyone is speaking, you can be removed, please. We will maintain decorum. Over here, as we go back to the rows, who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am, you're in the front row.
My name is Beth Garrell. I live at 591 Island Walk East in Bell Hall. I feel badly for that gentleman, having gone through what he's experienced with the loss of everything. This is unprecedented time and unprecedented circumstances that we're in at this point in time. I am here, I am an RN. My husband is a physician. I currently work in school, well, not currently, I'm on hiatus, but I will speak to the fact that there's nothing been like this before, so we have nothing to go on. What's very disturbing is I wear a mask. I always wear a mask. I have a level 3 on. When I go to the grocery store, I have a level 4 on because I don't trust anyone else in the grocery store. Masks, contrary to all the craziness going on there, really do not prevent your oxygenation being appropriate. If you have some obstructive pulmonary disease, perhaps if you wear it for a protracted period of time. But that being said, masks really are the answer, and contrary to what he said, the anti-maskers from back in the Spanish flu days 102 years ago were as prevalent as they are now. I actually am daunted by the fact that our numbers are so atrocious, that our percent positives are well over 20% as of yesterday. I drive around, I adore Shem Creek. I drove by there the other night and my heart almost broke when I saw the Crow's Nest up at Red's full. Saturday night, full. I drove by Pages, closed. I drove by Abidewell this morning, closed. I think we need to do something that's the right thing. My husband will tell you, as a physician, he works in urgent care. He sees 150, 180 patients in a 12-hour day. 95% of them are either COVID positive and or in for screening. And depending where you are, it's because they're younger and they have been out to the bars. Or if you're in another locale, it's because they're critically sick and they're coming to urgent care because it's cheaper than going to the emergency room, where they end up anyway. So I implore you to set politics aside and make this a public health issue, because it really is about the public's health.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next, please. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tavia Buck. Address is 2761 Parker's Landing Road, 29466. I'm here today on behalf of Roper St. Francis Healthcare and am in support of a mandate on mask wearing. And I just want to share with you recent numbers to put things into light. Patients that we were seeing diagnosed with COVID-19 from March to Memorial Day averaged about 3 per day. Not a crisis, not what we were seeing up in New York or across the country. Today, we are averaging 64 patients a day, and that number continues to rise, and that's been since Memorial Day. Our average age groups year to date, from March until Memorial Day, it was a spattering. It was mostly the elderly population from ages 50 and higher. Today, we are seeing that has increased, and ages 18 to 40 make up over 50% of the population that's being diagnosed with COVID. Masks do help prevent and slow the spread of COVID-19. All we're asking is you wear a mask when you enter a grocery store. Protect the frontline workers. It's not just the nurses that you're protecting and the healthcare providers, but you're also protecting those folks that are providing you groceries, pharmacy, etc. The nurses wear the masks. They are in PPE, protective personal equipment, 12, 16 hours a day, and they're wearing a mask that entire time, and then also when we're out in the community. So I ask that you reconsider and you consider supporting a mandate for masks. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Buck, will y'all be around should there be any questions when we get to debating?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, Jason Thompson, 12716 Mile, 29466. I have a ton of things I could say, but if you're going to wear a mask, wear one that has filters on the side. That's all I'm saying. Then you're not huffing your own breath. At least you're getting air in. Thank you.
Thanks.
Lynn Gunderson, 2072 Willbrook Lane, Mount Pleasant. I've lived here for about a year. I'm from San Diego, so I have a lot of stats from California because I watch California very carefully. California and in San Diego County, they have had a mask order for almost 2 months. They've also had one in Los Angeles for almost 2 months. They've also had one in Imperial County for almost 2 months. And yet, their headlines are just as distressing and dismal as the ones we are seeing here locally. Los Angeles County virus update. Hospitalizations rise, positivity rate rises and jumps, spikes in cases. June 27th, Los Angeles has the highest number of coronavirus cases among the state's 58 counties and the most deaths. June 28th, LA County faces critical moment as coronavirus cases keep surging. Today's headline, California sees 69% COVID rises in the last 2 days as LA County has the most cases in the US. San Diego County has the mask order in place for over 6 weeks. Here's their latest data. As of yesterday, San Diego County reports nearly 500 new cases Sunday, the highest daily tally of cases in the county since the pandemic began. San Diego County has reported 8 new community outbreaks over the last 7 days, which puts it in the outbreak threshold established by the county. 7 or more outbreaks within 7 days could mean county official pause and dial back reopenings. Imperial County, east of San Diego, has a mask requirement since April 10th. June 27th, Governor Newsom, quote, "Hospitalizations are going up. Number of people in ICUs going up. Number of people on ventilators going up. I just sent 76 ventilators down to Imperial County. We are in the midst of a pandemic." Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This side? Yes. How about the lady in the front, and then you, ma'am? You go ahead and sit here in front. That way we can work our way back and kind of keep a sense of where we are.
Good morning. Linda Seaton, 561 Galera Lane, Mount Pleasant. I'd like the people behind me to get pencil and paper and write down everything I say. I want you to really recognize the faces, masks or not, that are sitting in front of us. I want you to remember them, and I want you to remember how they vote. This is vitally important. Right now, I'm a researcher. My friends are doctors and RNs. Right now, God, our divinity, is being challenged. Our government is not our God. I carry my Constitution pocket-size with me. It is yellowed all through it. Everyone should carry one. This is a fascist attempt, what is going on here right now. These masks are produced on dirty floors in the Asian market. I have videotapes of them. On the floor with children and people, unsanitized. This is a miscarriage of justice, and we are not going to stand for it. And I want each and every one of you to take responsibility for what you are about to do if you vote outside of our constitutional right. I want you all to know Barry Trower, M16, write it down. I want you to know Deborah Tavares, T-A-V as in Victor, E-R-A-S, stopthecrime.net. I want you to know Dr. Andrew Kaufman, K-A-U-F-M-A-N. I want you to know Dr. Thomas Cowan, C-O-W-A-N. I want you to know Dr. Buttar, B-U-T-T-A-R. I want you to know you've got me this nervous now. Know what you are doing. This mask does nothing but put us in lockstep for what is coming. Whether we wear this mask or not, this fascism is in the plan. UN Agenda 21. I've read it. I've read it.
Next, please.
Hello, I'm Kathleen King. My address is 307 Wild Horse Lane, Mount Pleasant, 29464. And I'm a longtime resident of Mount Pleasant and a longtime educator, over 40 years in education. And I believe that this is part of what we have to do, is educate people about the masks and about the importance of being part of a community. We are responsible for one another. We are part of a group that you need to know your neighbors, you need to know what you stand for, where you are, and the idea that we would not care enough about one another to wear a mask to prevent people who are fragile or other issues from getting sick is ridiculous. We care about our community. We live here because we are a community. It's very important to me, very important to me. And I would like to speak, of course, in favor of an ordinance that would would encourage masks everywhere, but I would also like to say that it would be important to have an ordinance that would be enforceable. And I think what's happened in places like San Diego, I have friends there who are always, every time they go out, are complaining that even though there's a mask law, nobody's enforcing it. What do you do about that? And, you know, that's a prime example of the law is set up, but nothing is done to offer some teeth to enforce it. And I'd like to encourage that. And finally, I want to say that it does take courage to make hard decisions and to make decisions that affect your neighbors and affect everyone around us. And I really hope you all have the courage to do the right thing and follow good medical practice and do what needs to be done here. As educators, we have to do that every day, and I appreciate all your work. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Council members, Mr. Mayor, I'm Dr. Oliverio, Robert Oliverio. I live at 608 Maygrass Court. I'm here in favor of the ordinance and on behalf of Mount Pleasant Hospital, Roper St. Francis. I work every day at the Rivers Avenue Testing Center, testing patients for COVID-19. I do have statistics, and I can tell you about what's been going on since we started testing. We started testing in March, and from March to the end of May, we saw about 1 out of 20 tests that we did come back positive for COVID-19. So that's 5%. Over the past 2 weeks, 1 out of every 5 tests, that's 20%, now come back positive for COVID-19. This started since the end of the week dated 5/29. We have tested 14,739 patients as of last night. We found 1,288 patients with COVID-19. Within the past 2 weeks, we found 845 of those 1,288 patients. That's 66%. Masks decrease the risk of transmission, this mask, by 70%. N95s decrease the risk of transmission by 99% or more. I would not be in front of patients with COVID-19 without a mask. The only way we know that we keep our risk of transmission low is for those people who may have the disease and those people who may be exposed to the disease both have masks. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you'll stay during our deliberations in case we have questions. Thank you. Yes, sir. Name, address, and 2 minutes, please.
My name is Joe Ankner. I live at 4818 Highway 17 in Awanda, but I work right here in Mount Pleasant. I'm 67 years old. I have an underlying health condition. I'm in a high-risk category. I'm also a musician, and I am a tour guide at Boone Hall Plantation right here in Mount Pleasant. I don't even want to talk about what it's doing to musicians, but I will tell you just for a minute about what's going on at my other job. In my capacity as a tour guide, I take people around the farm, give them about a 25-minute lecture on the agricultural history of Boone Hall Plantation, show them how we grow things now. I do this with 2 covered hay wagons towed by a tractor. Each one of those wagons will seat about 30 people. On one of my trips here in the last 3 weeks since we reopened, 6 people had face coverings other than myself. On another one, 2 people had face coverings other than myself. On the rest, no one wore a mask other than me. Now, constitutional issues have been used as an excuse to not make these mandated. Well, I cherish our Constitution. I keep a copy on my dresser. It is the most precious document ever created by man. And our Bill of Rights is probably the most precious part of it. But those rights are not absolute. The First Amendment guarantees us our right to freedom of expression, to freedom of speech, but it doesn't guarantee you the right to cry fire in a crowded theater. Heck, telling smokers they can't light up in a crowded bar certainly infringes on their personal liberty, but when evidence became overwhelming that secondhand smoke was a threat to non-smokers' health, it became a public health issue. And of course, we outlawed it. So in making your decision, please, keeping in mind that this disease has killed more people in 4 months in this country alone than the flu killed in 2019 around the entire planet in the entire year. Thank you.
Next from this row, please. And then you, yep.
I'm Michael Harley. I live at 1600 Longwood Drive. I am a healthcare professional in safety and occupational health and safety on project job sites, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, if y'all proceed and pursue this with face masks, these are not the correct face masks. N95s are the correct face mask. Men who have beards and all, stuff gets out. I actually perform face mask testing. Make sure and ensure that they fit and wear properly. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you. My name is Dana Kraus. I live at 3944 Hanoverian Drive. Last Tuesday, I launched a petition to ask you, the council, and Mayor Haney to consider voting in favor of a face mask petition. I have over 2,700 signatures in favor of the ordinance. Of those 27 signatures, 61% are residents of Mount Pleasant. The petition has been viewed over 7,600 times and shared 742 times. I started this petition because I have a daughter in elementary school, and I'd really like for her to be able to go back into the classroom this fall. I also feel like the South Carolina Accelerate Ed has met and worked really hard this summer to try to come up with a plan to get our students back in school. And with the current rate that the COVID virus is rising, that's not going to happen. One of the statistics that I think is important to note is that the WHO says that 80% of people who test positive for the virus are either asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, meaning that they may not even know they have it and they're spreading it. Another thing that I think is important to note is there's a big misconception that if you wear a mask, you're safe, and that's just not the case. Pennsylvania's health department likes to say, I wear my mask to protect you, and you wear your mask to protect me. And I think that's important because the principle of the mask is to keep your germs in. So I do hope that council will put aside their personal feelings and political feelings and vote along the lines of scientific evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from this side of the room? Yes, ma'am. Name, address, and when you hear the beep, your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Althea Donahue, and 1356 Downsbury Drive in Mount Pleasant. And I didn't know I was going to come up and speak today, but I feel that it's necessary that I say this, that I find it very challenging to talk with this on my face and breathe. I also note that OSHA says that this is dangerous. You don't get adequate oxygen. And I also know from looking on the internet that these things that actual viruses can penetrate through these masks. I have no problem with people wearing masks. That's their choice as an American citizen, if that's what they'd like to do. But I don't feel that I should be mandated to have to do so when I can't even breathe with this thing on my face. So that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from this side? All right, let's move to this side. Anyone? Yes, please.
Perry Rourke, 2004 Brook Kiln Parkway. I came here today to comment on ordinance number 20037, but unfortunately that's difficult to do considering the ordinance has never been posted anywhere for the residents of this town to view. For 5 days, this has been a draft ordinance. The use of the emergency authority of this council It inhibits us from being able to view it because by the rules, you don't have to put it up there. That's one of the problems, is how the council, some members of this council are misusing their emergency authority. They had this on an agenda for Friday for a council meeting. It was an emergency, which means if they use the emergency authority, we don't get 24 hours notice of a meeting. We don't get to review what's in this ordinance, but yet council is allowed to vote. So it was an emergency on Friday. There was a quorum on Friday, but yet they could have called to order a meeting and had a vote, but it wasn't done. So what I'm questioning is, was that a legitimate use of the emergency use of this council? To me, it's not. So that's my first question. Why are we here today? People deserve to know what's in the ordinance before y'all vote on it today. We don't know. Does it require me to wear a mask when I'm driving my car? Does it require me to wear a mask in 90-degree heat when I'm walking my dog through the neighborhood? What's the penalty? Is it a $5 fine? Is it a $1,000 fine? Is it imprisonment? We don't know because we've never seen the ordinance. We've never seen the resolution or the other ordinances here today. Every other council meeting, normally, it's on the agenda, it's published, we get to see it. I'm asking, did you vote no? Let's post it, let the residents review it, and let people like myself come up and give actual legitimate comment about it today so we can make a plan moving forward. But how this emergency authority is being misused by certain members of this council, it needs to stop. This pandemic is going to continue to go on. What other things are going to get pushed through here without the residents having their rights? Every time this emergency power is used, it circumvents the rights of the residents of this town. Thank you.
Anyone else from this side?
Good afternoon. Dennis Blythe, 610 Pelzer Drive. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank all of the health professionals that came out today. I know that you're very busy. I want to thank you for the time that you spend and the risk you take and your families take in trying to help us. Secondly, I'd like to say it was my understanding coming here, I like some of the others have mentioned, am a person that's at risk. I'm 67 and a half years old, and I have underlying health conditions, etc. I was told on the phone when I found out there was even going to be the ability for the public to be in this meeting, that everyone would be required to wear a face mask. There are people here now, and most especially people on the council, sitting here without face masks on. I don't appreciate that. It's unfortunate. It is not about protecting yourself, and it's not about your individual liberties. It's about society as a whole and protecting those around you, those that you love, those that you care about, your own families, etc., and the public that you serve. Anyway, I just I can't offer too much more than that. As far as the Constitution, the Attorney General has issued an opinion. I think it supports the right of this council to take action. I ask that they do so. I sent a letter last week mentioning that. I want to thank those GM and Mayor Haney that have been vocal in their support of doing something about this. The others, if you are supportive, I appreciate it greatly. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Last call. All right. That concludes item number 2, and moves us to item number 3, which is an emergency ordinance to temporarily suspend the normal operating procedures of Mount Pleasant Town Council meetings and matters related thereto. And let me assure everyone that despite the term suspend normal operating procedures, all it means is that does not mean we won't be operating. It means that we may operate under procedures that take into consideration the condition that we're operating in. We had one passed before, back in March. It expired after 61 days as required by law. We will need this going forward, as we were informed today, and council member gave us her permission. We have a council member showing some symptoms. for which she has self-quarantined and will be getting that checked out. So in the future going forward, and I know some other council members have asked the question, what if you had to quarantine? What if a council member had to quarantine? Does that mean you can't show up and vote at our regular monthly meetings? If we pass this, we're able to meet by video conference, and if you look around us, that's what the other councils are doing. So this has been drafted by our attorneys. If there is a motion and a second, it will put us into discussion, and this is ordinance number 20036, correct, Mr. Pagliarini?
To approve.
Second. We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. Is everyone familiar with the details? They're listed out on page 2 of 3, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I am not in favor of extending another state of emergency. I mean, people are going to work every day. I think we can continue to come into work every day as well, when we do have meetings. I have expressed concern that if, it's bound to happen sooner or later that all of us will come in contact with somebody and have to quarantine or are showing symptoms. And so at next week's Police, Legal, and Judicial Committee, I would like us to take a look at that specific ordinance and possibly temporarily suspend that ordinance so that an individual member can call in, if they're being ordered to quarantine or whatever, but not us as a whole, not meeting in person, canceling things, and I'm just not in favor of that.
Mr. Pagliarini, would you, we had this discussion earlier, that aspect of our law, ordinance or state law, would that be an emergency ordinance, or is that something that would require a series of readings?
Mr. Rambo's referencing, I believe, our ordinance 30.35.
That does not allow people to call in.
Right. It's a fairly old ordinance, probably outdated. There is nothing under state law, federal law, anything under FOIA that would prevent the town or any public body from holding meetings online by telephone or however. It is our own ordinance. So this ordinance is proposed, again, emergency, only valid for a maximum of 61 days, and it doesn't necessarily order or mandate that council meet remotely. It provides that opportunity as well as for our other boards and commissions. So the flexibility remains. But to answer your specific question, Mayor, yes, sir, if we amend our ordinances for the long term, and that is amend 30.35, that would require the standard 2 readings of council. Yes, sir.
Okay. The other thing I would address in response to Mr. Rambo's comments is how it affects the functioning of the town. This is item number 3 of the town staff. The administrator is authorized to develop and enact a plan in order to ensure continuity of delivery of government services in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Currently, since our previous emergency order has expired, I'm not sure what authority the town administrator has other than, he's been carrying on, as we have said, with our acknowledgement. But this puts it in writing that whatever adjustments he has to make, including closing down certain areas when there is a COVID response, other than that, I don't know that you have the express covering from this council to do so. And I strongly recommend that in this environment that we're in, we make sure all our bases are covered. And the other thing is, when we talk about not interrupting or not doing our work, if you have a board and commission where they express to their chairman they would rather meet remotely and do their work than just not come in and they don't have a quorum, that's how we're impeding the work and the continuity of boards and commission service to our town. So I'm strongly in favor of this emergency ordinance. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Lanning.
Thank you, Mayor. Having read through this, I just want to make sure people know that we had an earlier emergency ordinance when we first had COVID breakout, and it was an urgent situation because everything was so new, and there were a lot of differences in that one. In fact, it actually put a lot more responsibility on our mayor. He was able to act on his own. It meant that as representatives of all of our citizens, we were not necessarily needed in the questioning or decision-making process. Again, put a lot more pressure on him. What's different about this one is that it would allow not only all of ours input, but a good example is Friday afternoon, when this emergency meeting was called, and it was really just barely 24 hours, which is the required amount for putting out a notice to the public. At that point, there were several people that the mayor couldn't reach, and once they were reached, which was by email at 5:26, it was found out that they were already going out of town the next morning and had to be out of town. So I say this because if we'd had this in place, those people could have possibly come in through a remote process. So I think it does make a lot of sense that since there's so many fluid things happening right now, that we should be able to use this if necessary. But again, it does not put all the responsibility on one person, it's on all of us. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Santos.
Mayor, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Rourke. I think he was spot on. Citizens have a right to know what we're doing in a timely manner so that they can show up like today. When we were notified of the meeting, I was notified at 4:16, less than 24 hours before the mayor had called the meeting. I was going out of town. 2 other people were going out of town as well. There was no way. Where I went, there was really spotty opportunities to be able to even get online. So, the situation is that we need to always at least give 24 hours minimum to our citizens so that they have an opportunity to come and read up ahead of time, rather than just call these meetings very quickly and then be able to pass ordinances or laws without the citizens having an opportunity to be there. So that was my situation. I was not here because I had to go to work. I was going out of town, and I was notified in less than 24 hours that we were going to have an emergency meeting. So I'm all in favor of going back to the way we were doing it at the beginning, so that our citizens are advised ahead of time, have plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to send in writing and or come to the meeting. This is your town, and it's up to us to conduct business that suits our citizens. So I'll be voting against this ordinance.
Mr. Pagliarini, what's the legal requirement for notices of emergency meetings?
Yes, sir. In this case, just for clarification, that notice period is not required. Certainly, with the town, we strive to do the best we can under circumstances, but the 24 hours is not required in this circumstance.
Thank you very much. I assure you every effort was made to do it within 24 hours. No, sir, we don't take public comment during council discussion. We already had that. Any other comments? All right.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up.
Yes, if no one else wanted to speak, you may. Yes.
I actually did not realize that this suspends the 24-hour notice, because I do think any time that we're having a discussion, our public should be able to hear everything we say. So that said, I think I would have to vote against it the way it reads now. Now, if we could add something where it's amended, but that would take I guess that would take an amendment, or how would we do that even? If we could add something so that the public is notified at least 24 hours in advance.
Ma'am, what has been happening, so we understand the difference. The prior meetings we've had, many of them are regular and special council meetings, which are different than an emergency meeting. So the only time the 24-hour period is waived is in an emergency situation. Of course, if it's a regular council meeting or a called special council meeting, we are required that 24 hours notice. So I just wanted to make sure all of council understands the distinction.
Well, I do think it's important that people realize that this topic, I just said that if we could have had this meeting on Friday, we would have, but of the circumstances, we didn't want people to be missing that were trying to represent their community. In this case, I would have to say that all of a sudden that turns everything on its head, because this was called an emergency, but I think we needed everybody's input, at least as many of us as possible. Obviously, we have one person missing today, but we would have had at least 3, if not 4 people missing on Friday. So this is making it hard, because I think we should have to have some notice.
I think there's a great deal of confusion among council members of the difference between a special meeting or our monthly council meeting and an emergency meeting. And let me just give you an example. When there were riots going on and property being damaged and lives being threatened, if y'all want to wait 24 hours instead of having an emergency meeting to address something that affects life and property, I think that is a imprudent decision during the middle of a stated emergency for the state of South Carolina. This is not to get around our normal notifications, even for the one that we tried to have Friday. That meeting was not put out as noticed until we were sure we had a quorum. And every effort was made, the clerk will tell you, to do 24 hours, even though it was not required. So, you know, we could end up, this council chambers could end up being closed for our meeting for July. We had to close our municipal court. We've had to close recreational facilities. We've had to close lots of things, and other businesses have had to close. And if we don't have an emergency ordinance and we can't meet, then that's impeding the process of this council. And we passed it easily last time. It was unanimous. And this has nothing to do with emergency powers to the mayor, which is a whole separate part of our ordinance. So I think you would really be hamstringing our progress in this declared emergency if you do not pass this today. We will get the clerk to call the roll. Does anyone else want to be recognized? Hang on just a second. I need to get... A yes vote is to pass the emergency ordinance of council. Everyone ready? Clerk, if you will.
Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing.
Yes.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke.
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Rambo.
No.
Mr. Rambo votes no. Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley is absent. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
I see 5 votes for, 3 votes against. The motion passes.
No, it doesn't.
No. Mayor,
No, I'm sorry, it's an
6
emergency ordinance. It took 6.
6, yes, sir.
Okay, so the motion fails. The next item on the agenda, just a second. All right, I have misplaced my agenda, sorry. Who's got a copy? Thank you. Item number 4, first and final reading, an emergency ordinance requiring persons to wear face coverings in certain circumstances in the town of Mount Pleasant to reduce risk of exposure to COVID-19 during the public health emergency and recovery. This would be ordinance number 20037. If we have a motion and a second, we can begin discussion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. We are now in discussion. Before we do this, our staff has arranged, because what triggered this meeting and the timing of the attempt to have it on Friday was the delivery of a report from our very own emergency coordinator who gave us statistics. If we're going to take a motion of this sort and we're going to consider this sort of action, I think it's important, since we have professional staff that can give us the statistics and what we're looking at as a community. So Ms. Knight, if you would please come up.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I compiled this report last week, as you mentioned, using data provided by the Department of Public Health and Environmental Control, and really an effort to identify trends for the Greenville area as well as Mount Pleasant area, utilizing zip code information that we receive on a daily basis. And so the first page you can see here are the trends for incorporated town of Mount Pleasant, surrounding unincorporated areas, as well as portions of Allendale. Unfortunately, we do not receive data any granular than the zip code. So what you can see here is that our trends for the area codes in which Mount Pleasant falls started to increase around June 11th and has continued to do so since. So this was compiled on June 23rd. I have looked at comparison to continuing out, extrapolating over the days between June 23rd to June 28th. And I can say that the trend continues in a pretty stable increasing pattern. As of 6/28, our zip codes have a total of 624 cumulative cases since the beginning of the onset. That is an increase from 459 on the 23rd. As far as Charleston County is concerned, as of 6/28, we have 3,380 cases cumulative since the beginning, and that is an increase from 2,416 as of 6/24. I can say, before I move on to the information from Greenville is in comparison, our positive test rate is now at 20.1%. On May 21st, it was at 7.0%. Okay, so here you can see very similar data. Trends for incorporated city of Greenville and surrounding unincorporated areas. They have many more zip codes than we do, but you can see scattered over since May 15th to June 23rd, this is how their trends have fallen. Looking at information, the data covering extrapolating out from the 23rd to the 28th, very similar style of trending. I can say that as of the 28th, Greenville area in which, zip codes in which Greenville City falls, has a cumulative 2,613 cases, whereas Greenville County has a cumulative 4,733 cases. And pending any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Whitley.
I would like to actually, in reviewing this ordinance, item number 1 requires masking for the public in a grocery store, pharmacy, or town building. But in item 2, it requires restaurants, retail, salons, barbershops as well for their employees to wear a face covering. I mean, for me personally, what I choose to do, or what I've chosen to do, is anytime I'm indoors where there is air conditioning and circulated air, whether it is a Target or a clothing store or anything like that, I wear a mask. And I think that the public should also wear a mask in a place like a clothing store. And so I would like to actually move that, to make an amendment to the ordinance to add retail stores, salons, and barbershops to Part 1.
Okay, hold on just a second. Your amendment is to add to Part 1.
Retail stores, salons, and barbershops. Because having this be piecemeal where you wear it in a grocery store, but you don't wear it in a clothing store, I think it needs to be more comprehensive.
All right, we have a motion to amend item number 1, and is there a second? May I ask Mr. Pagliarini, under Robert's rules, the chair is not allowed to second amendments?
No, sir, I think under our rules, you may.
Under our rules, I may,
Yes,
but
sir.
under Robert's rules, I'm not.
Right.
Okay, the chair will second the motion to make that amendment. And would that be especially, Mrs. Whitley, to part number 1, right?
Yes.
Would it alter part number 2?
It would not.
Okay, so part 2 would remain the same. All right, so we have a motion and a second. As we discuss amendments to this, according to our parliamentarian, it is only majority, but when we pass the entire ordinance, it has to be a 2/3 majority. So on amendments, we can pass by simple majority. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make clear. So what you're saying is our normal rules here are Robert's Rules of Order. That's how we conduct our meetings. And this time, you're going to not go with Robert's Rules of Order so that you can advance an issue. I'm not sure,
I'm asking the parliamentarian what the town ordinance allows, Mr. Santos, and his answer was yes.
I understand that.
Well, I don't appreciate your insinuation.
What I'm saying is, you are always holding up the Robert's Rules of Order, telling everybody that they have to abide by it, but all of a sudden now, you don't have to abide by it. And I don't like that. I don't think the citizens like that.
I'll go to the parliamentarian to explain the difference.
Nothing to do with the parliamentarian. He already made his statement. Go ahead. I mean, you go ahead and vote. You've already called it. I'm just saying, whenever you hold up that Robert's Rules Order and tell the citizens they got to abide by it, now all of a sudden you're saying you don't because you want your issue passed? I mean, come on, man.
Mr. Pagliarini, would you explain how there are town rules that supersede Robert's rules, and it is by ordinance?
Yes, sir. Mayor, there is a hierarchy of rules, and our hierarchy essentially says that town ordinance provides the primary directive for rules of order, and anything not covered by our rules then is passed down to Robert's rules would be the next governing set of rules in order.
For instance, in Robert's rules, the chair doesn't usually vote unless there is a tie, but that is not for a governing body when we are sent here to vote. Is that correct?
That is one example, yes, sir.
So I vote every time, and you haven't had a problem with that, Mr. Santos. I don't know why you have a problem with this all of a sudden.
Mr. Mayor, we can go ahead and vote. I'm just pointing out the fact that you're always holding up Robert's Rules and talking about how we're supposed to go by Robert's Rules. But apparently, it's only when you want to go by Robert's
No,
Rules.
he just explained the difference.
Okay.
Can we act like adults?
I agree.
Good Lord.
Yes. Any other discussion on this motion? All in favor of the amended motion to amend Part 1 to add retail, salons, and barbershops, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's hard to tell with the mask on. Is that 3? All opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, the noes have it. The motion fails.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to offer an amendment under Section 3. Many of the concerns that I've heard about this revolve around folks that have certain medical conditions where they cannot wear a mask. And I think that, with my background in education and everything, I mean, many of these issues are very private to people. And I do not believe that they should be required to disclose what their medical condition or psychological condition is. So the amendment I would like to propose would go in Section 3, and it would be that no one should have to disclose their medical condition. So, if you're asked why you don't have a mask on, you can, you don't have to go into detail about your medical issues.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We are in discussion. Let me ask for clarification. No one should have to disclose their medical condition, but that would make it possible for them to disclose that they have one, just not the details. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think that's a good way to look at it. That's sort of runs parallel to the ADA requirements, that it can be stated that there's a condition, but not have to specify the reasons.
Okay, and this would just be added to section number 3.
Yes, sir. 3A is where I would put it.
3A. We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment as proposed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask our attorneys for clarification in number 3, where it says all persons 12 years of age or under are exempt, provided that adults accompanying children ages 2 through 12 shall cause those children to wear face coverings while in areas required by this ordinance. They're exempt, but they've got to wear masks when they're with their parents. Is that
Sir,
what it says?
the intent of it, and believe me, we have discussed this significantly at the staff level, is that where possible, adults, and the idea, I guess plainly, no legal knowledge required, when you have a 4-year-old trying to keep a mask on them is not a possible circumstance in all conditions. So it's intended to provide flexibility. And some council members have pointed out correctly, at least from the age standpoint, about camps and the like and certain activities, that 12 is probably an appropriate age. But I do want to make council aware that, no pride of authorship, obviously, there are many different ways to handle this. If it's total exemption under a certain age, that's a simple way to look at it, would certainly be appropriate. Or if there's no exemption, or, we could discuss something like parental discretion to a certain age. All of those are possible, and all of those are feasible to be written in.
I'm just asking the question because before I came, I talked to 3 physicians. One was a pediatrician, one was in the internal medicine category, the other was a interventional cardiologist. The pediatrician suggested the age of wearing the mask, probably under 6 would be excluded. And so I'm just wrestling with this, that 6 years old probably should wear a mask. Under that, maybe the parents accompanying, and I'm just saying that based on discussions with a pediatrician that 6 might be better than 12. But I'm not sold on that, and I'm just curious if anybody else has a better idea on that. Okay, I'll leave it like you've got it. That's why I wanted clarification about what this actually meant.
Yes, Ms. Lanning.
I want to bring a little data to the picture that I also researched. We got some great information from Amanda. Thank you very much. I don't think I'm very easily heard through this, so I'm going to take it off for a minute. Here are the latest South Carolina DHEC numbers for 29464 and 29466 zip codes as of yesterday afternoon, the last update. In 29464, there were 390 confirmed cases since the beginning, and the beginning that I'm aware of, I started watching the numbers closely around March 15th. They may have been available before, but it's cumulative. So since then, we've had 390 cases total confirmed. In 29466, it's 212 confirmed cases since the beginning. 602 cases total. Our combined zip codes have nearly 91,000 residents. So over the last 15 weeks, the chance of contracting COVID-19 in Mount Pleasant is still less than 0.7%. However, in the last 6 weeks, we have gone from 119 confirmed cases for the first 9 weeks that the data was available and that I saw it, which stayed the same for about 3 weeks in a row. And in fact, actually, the chart does show that. And I think that's really significant. We had actually plateaued before we started opening up. I was very aware of when we opened up because my husband and I happened to have an anniversary and we were able to go out to dinner somewhere indoors. Surrounding communities such as IOP that just passed a mandatory ordinance on Friday after they turned it down on Tuesday, mostly because of public outcry, has had 21 confirmed cases the entire time with 4,340 residences, less than 0.5% occurrence in 15 weeks. Now, what our family has observed, and we're all wearing masks at this point when we go to the grocery store and pharmacy and other public places, is that about 90% of shoppers in the grocery stores around here are already wearing a mask. Maybe you've had a different experience, but most people, whether it's because they believe in it, whether it's peer pressure, social pressure, I'm not sure, most people are trying to wear a mask. Do we actually need to require everyone to cover his or face in public places enforced by one uniformed code enforcement officer writing a ticket, which is virtually unenforceable? And by the way, that's what it would be. It is not a criminal offense, it's a civil offense, and that's how it would be enforced. So you have one person versus 91,000 in the community. Or should we mandate that the businesses themselves, especially grocery stores and pharmacies that are necessary places for us to go, would require them, and then let them, such as what Costco does. They outlaw without a mask, you don't get in the door if you don't have a mask, and that's up to people whether they want to go to Costco or not. Or should we pass a resolution asking all our citizens and businesses to wear a face covering when entering public places? We have to remember that when making public policy that is mandatory, enforcement must be considered and has to be a part of the decision. A resolution would show huge support for this issue and create a greater grassroots community-building culture that would encourage those who are willing to wear it to do so, and those who cannot for various reasons would not. Now, a couple other things that are important to keep in mind. When you look at enforcement, on the draft, which several people have mentioned wasn't really available ahead of time, it says, somebody asked the question, it says that the code enforcement officer could give you a citation for a $25 fine if you're not wearing a mask in a public place. The business, if they aren't wearing masks or they aren't enforcing this, have a $100 fine per day until they fix the problem. And if they don't fix the problem in so many days, it doesn't spell out in detail, I don't believe, what I read, we can actually revoke their business license. Do we as council want to now create an environment where we are actually going to be sending our businesses away after all they've been through with coronavirus, with the rioting downtown, with all the things we've been facing as a community? Do we really want to pit ourselves as the town leadership against our own businesses? If we weren't spending this much time on the divisive topic of how people feel about masks, we might actually be spending more time on the much bigger issue, which is building our immunity. And I'm not going to sit here and lecture about how you build your immunity, because I think we all have read plenty or heard plenty, and there are some medical experts in the audience. But what I can tell you is that one of the things that I think that we still are overlooking is that there are things that we can do, such as a lot of fresh air and sunshine, and the number one way, and medical people throughout will tell you this, to build your immunity is through extra oxygen. The more you can get out and get fresh air, the more you can breathe deeply. This is one of the reasons why things like meditation, prayer, and yoga are so good for you, because you breathe deeply and you bring extra oxygen into your system. Masks do cut down on that. Even if they don't cut it out, they do cut down on that. I also read early on 4 different very scientific reports. I do have a science background. That's my undergraduate degree. I won't go into all the courses I took, but suffice it to say, between several semesters of organic chemistry and many others, and a year's worth of recombinant DNA research with an MD, PhD candidate who published the paper successfully, I can tell you I have at least a little knowledge on the subject. And one of the things that was shown in these reports is that zinc is very effective in blocking the attachment of coronavirus to your cell's receptors, making it very difficult for the virus to replicate. Now, we heard a little bit about this from Dr. Fauci and others early on, but we haven't heard much about it since. But if you were to talk to our town doctors and you have any kind of upper respiratory issue, which, by the way, a lot of them are coronaviruses, this just happens to be a particular one, you probably know that, they will actually tell you, in addition to the treatment things you should do for your symptoms, that you should take some form of zinc, because it does act as a wall on the receptors in your cells. I think working on our immunity is a much more positive conversation that we can all believe in, because we all want to avoid getting this thing altogether. We don't just want to not sneeze on other people. Another thing is, how as we at town leadership, early on we had a retreat, and in that retreat we were asked to talk about our vision, what we wanted for the town. And one of the things I said, that one of my visions for the town of Mount Pleasant was that we continue to build on the wonderful culture we have as a community that truly tries to work together to solve problems, and not that we as town leadership would always create a rule for everything. We've had a really challenging situation, but I think that when you look at the data of where we are right now, we probably, let me just clarify that earlier thing I said, we probably have, at most right now, 200 to 300 confirmed cases of people with coronavirus in Mount Pleasant. Now, we know there could be a lot more that are asymptomatic, but the reality is that with almost 91,000 people, your chance of contracting this, especially if you're wearing a mask and if you're keeping 6 feet away from people, is very, very low. Now, Mayor Summy from North Charleston, a lot of people like to point out what other communities are doing. He actually just stated that he does not want North Charleston to become a police state. So instead of having a meeting like this one that can create a lot of divisiveness because of the different opinions and very, very strong, heated opinions on this subject, he is now having all police cars carry masks that can be handed out to any residents who do not have one. I think as an example, that would be a wonderful community-building way. We're getting so much heat on our police. Our police here in Mount Pleasant do an amazing job, and I actually believe most police across the country do an amazing job. How great would it be if they could be involved with us on something else where we already do so much community building? This would just be another way to do that. So in conclusion, I propose that we, and I know this is not a motion, I'm just saying I believe that we should pass a resolution regarding encouraging our residents and businesses to wear a face covering while in public places, indoors, or anywhere they can't distance at least 6 feet from others. But I do believe we need to let people and businesses do things the way they strongly believe is right for them.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Kathy. I think that was well said. In fact, the next item is a resolution, possible resolution, and I think that will accomplish what you're doing. I'd just like to mention, in item number 2, it talks about the town buildings and indoor facilities in the town must require employees to wear a face covering at all times while having face-to-face interaction with the public and other employees. And number 5, it says an employee who fails to comply with Section 2 of this ordinance shall be guilty of a civil infraction punishable by a fine of not more than $100. And person shall be defined as any individual associated with the business who has control or authority over the ability to enforce the requirements of the ordinance within the business, such as the owner, manager, or supervisor. Reading this, Mount Pleasant is considered a business. I checked with our attorney earlier, and he says it's considered a business. So basically what this is saying is that one of our staff, one of our young staff that's working, if they make a mistake, can actually be fined $100. And if they do it again and over, it said it could result in suspension or revocation of any occupancy permit or business license issued to the business where the repeated violations occur. So if one of our staff members, young staff members, makes a mistake once or twice or whatever, it appears, according to this, that the town could lose their business license. I mean, the way this is written. So I did think it needs to be looked at better. I don't think this was really written appropriate. I could be wrong, but after speaking with our attorney, that's what I'm getting out of this. We're considered a business, and if a person in the business, which was one of our employees, makes a mistake once or twice or 3 times, according to this, it could result in us losing our business license as a town. So anyway, I wanted to bring that forward just to say that I think this needs to be looked at more careful. Thank you.
We are in discussion of the motion. We have taken up the amendments. We are in discussion of the motion to approve as amended, which we have done. The ordinance requiring mask in certain retail situations. I have a couple of statements then, if no one else wants to be recognized, that I would like to make. I don't know about fellow council members. I answer the calls when I'm asked to represent the town in certain regional and statewide teleconferences, and that was the majority of my time all of last week. We are in a state of emergency, which we have been for the state since early March. One of the reasons we did this was that our numbers were, as you can see, approaching what the situation that they're having in Greenville. I asked our emergency manager on Tuesday to compile this. I notified council of all of that. I got this compilation on Thursday, sent it to all of council, having told council that the purpose of getting that data was to call an emergency meeting so we could have this discussion. This was sent out by Dr. Marcus Blackstone, the Chief Clinical Officer of the Bon Secure St. Francis Health System in Greenville. This is what we need to think about if we are willing for Mount Pleasant to be facing. These are his words. Increased testing is not causing the increased positive rates. The positive rate has gone from 70% a few weeks ago to 15% now. That was then. We just heard that our positive rate is approaching 20%. In our Hispanic neighborhoods, this is Greenville, the positive rate is 40 to 50%. The downtown St. Francis ICU beds are virtually full. The patients coming in now with COVID are much sicker than when the epidemic started. More younger people are getting sick, many now under the age of 40. Young people are testing positive in large numbers, yet they are asymptomatic. Ann Med Hospital in Anderson had 900 Clemson students coming in for testing Thursday morning. I haven't heard the result of those numbers. Hospital employees are now getting sick in great numbers. They have travel nurses coming in because of the number of hospital staff that are out sick. Spartanburg Regional Hospital has so many staff nurses out that they may need to close a floor of the hospital. The combination of not being able to contain cases now and a possible fall wave could cause the perfect storm of illnesses. We've heard from our Roper Hospital here. I spoke with Patrick Downs at East Cooper Medical Center. He said to please give you this quote: "There is a spread in our community and action should be taken." He supports a masking mandate. He gave me these numbers. These were as of this morning. I'm sure they've changed. The medical university now has in the mid-60s of numbers of patients in the hospital. The Trident hospitals have 53. Roper has 51, 7 in Mount Pleasant, the cohort downtown in Mount Pleasant. East Cooper Medical Center now has 4, which is a manageable number. I also have some statements that others have asked me to give to y'all. Mike Seekings of Charleston City Council said that after they passed theirs, the response was overwhelmingly positive from businesses, institutions, and citizens. He's also the chairman of CARTA. He implores us to pass a mask ordinance because that could affect public transportation as well, even though masks are required on CARTA. Dr. Bell of DHEC wants a statewide mask ordinance to come from the governor. So if we don't get one statewide, we heard from the governor that we have the authority to do that. She also says hospitalizations are rising across the state. In one teleconference last week, the top 3 executives from the medical university were on there. Dr. Cole, the president, said it will get worse for 2 weeks until anything takes effect. He said we are using up our grace period. Dr. Cawley of MUSC, the chief operating officer, said everyone is seeing significant increases and have in hospitalized patients within all systems. Dr. Cole said if we don't slow the rate, this will be a different situation in 6 weeks due to the stress on the hospital system. Rick Crosby, the chair of Mount Pleasant Waterworks, with whom we're supposed to have our annual meeting tonight, the biggest meeting of the year. Councilman Rambo and I sit as commissioners of that, was diagnosed positive on Friday. They have an emergency ordinance, so he won't have to miss that meeting. But, you know, without one, he would have had to miss the most important meeting of the year. But he said, use my case, use my example for your council to show why this mask ordinance would be very important. And as for enforcement, we comply with and we are part of hurricane evacuations. All of our police, fire, and public services go into action. Tell me what enforcement there is of hurricane evacuations. Have you ever seen anyone get a ticket or be arrested for not doing that? The smoking ordinance. When's the last time you saw someone smoking in a restaurant? I haven't heard of anyone getting a ticket or being arrested for smoking, but yet somehow it works. Shirts are required in restaurants. Shoes are required in restaurants. So I would implore my colleagues that if you don't want this temporary wearing of a piece of cloth to stop a virus, to avoid the situation that has been described by our local healthcare experts and those that are already experiencing this, then perhaps maybe at some point we don't need these other healthcare regulations in the town of Mount Pleasant, because I'd never heard a hospitalization rate from secondhand smoke. I never heard someone having to close their business because of secondhand smoke. I'm tired of hearing our businesses having to close. It is the virus that is closing businesses now, not government. And if we won't take a step to do this when we know we have lots of other ordinances that we're not worried about enforcement on, or hurricane evacuations we're not worried about enforcement on, if we won't do this so that the business can say it is a town requirement, you must wear a mask when you're in our business, then I don't know. It didn't occur to me that we might not pass this today, but you know, who am I, right? Are we prepared to vote on this ordinance? Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Just
one more comment. I just want to make sure, and I'm sure everybody remembers the protesters and the thousands of people we had descend on us the last couple of weeks. And so I'm thinking a lot of them in the crowd did not have masks, and you could see them clearly. So I'm thinking some of these spikes that we're seeing now could be some of those folks that were all gathered in those crowds as they protested and went down the street. I mean, they were all together, they were all close, and that very possibly could be why, I'm not a doctor, but I'm thinking that could be why we've got such a spike so quickly.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I've tried to be quiet, and I know Mr. Santos just said he wasn't a doctor. Maybe he slept in Holiday Inn Express and got that information, but I'm trying to be a little bit comical. This is not a comical issue. The Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation indicates that immediate universal masking would curb the infection and save approximately 270 lives in South Carolina between now and October 1. I want to be one of those 270 lives that are saved. I also want to mention, if you drive around Mount Pleasant, remember, we're more than the residents of Mount Pleasant. Look at the cars from Kentucky, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, many other states that have had serious problems. Those people are coming here. We want them to wear masks. They're some of the ones that aren't wearing them. We want to have something on the books to require them to do it because they weren't doing it in their state. And I call for the question, Mayor.
You can call for the question if no one else wants to be recognized. If someone else wants to be recognized, we can't.
I would like to propose an amendment.
Okay. Was Ms. Hyatt asking to be recognized? Okay, I'm sorry. Because if you have not spoken yet, you do get recognized first.
I'd like to propose an amendment to this ordinance that instead of 1 and 2, that we would instead say that grocery stores and pharmacies and town buildings as essential services that everyone has to go to would themselves require and enforce a mask covering. And that way, the enforcement of it falls on the businesses and not on one code enforcement officer. And that way, just like Costco, you can choose to go there or not. If you don't want to have to wear a mask in there, you can do online delivery or whatever, or curbside delivery. I would like to propose that we amend 1 and 2 to be that instead of us requiring our people, that we require that those types of essential businesses require a mask.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second? No discussion unless we have a second? Is there a second? All right. The motion fails for lack of a second. We are in discussion on the passing of the mask ordinance. Is there anyone else who wants to be recognized? Yes, sir.
Mr. DeMora, a couple questions about enforcement.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. I call for the question, and I think that's a required move rather than any more discussion. And I'd ask our attorney to clarify that.
Certainly.
The chair can make the decision, and if there's a disagreement with the chair's position on that, then there'd be a vote, a majority vote among council as to whether to move forward with the question or not, or to allow further discussion.
It would have to be a vote, and there is one council member who would like to be recognized. I will let that council member be recognized at this point.
Thank you, Mayor. Just so this is a civil penalty, which means our police officers do not enforce civil penalties. Civil penalties are enforced by code enforcement, which we have one code enforcement officer for 93,000 people who deals primarily with zoning issues or, you know, your signage that's out of place or whatever. So I guess what happens when we inevitably get a lot of phone calls that somebody's not wearing a mask in Harris Teeter? What do we say?
Well, when council passes an ordinance, myself along with the town staff are obligated to carry it out. If enforcement is something that you would like included in this ordinance, then we can do the best we can with the one code enforcement officer that we have. Or we can shuffle around, restructure the planning department to send individuals into code enforcement to beef up that capability. If we do that, that means that you will likely end up seeing a slowing. Remember, this is a department that's currently affected by our hiring freeze. You'll see a slowing in permitting, as we would have to bring employees that normally perform site visits, steps that are required before someone can get a permit, who will be moved into this area.
Okay, one follow-up question. So, given that it's not a police officer, if a code enforcement officer walks up to said person at Harris Teeter and says, hey, why don't you have a mask on? The person says, get lost. What happens then?
If the person's belligerent, my comment directive to the employee would be to back away, to not engage the person at that point.
Okay. All right.
Okay. We are to the point of voting on this proposed mask ordinance as amended. We have voted on the amendments. It takes a required 2/3 vote, which is 6.
Yes, sir.
With this number of council members. A yes vote is to pass the mask ordinance as amended. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. O'Rourke.
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley is absent. Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing.
No.
Ms. Landing votes no. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. By a 6-2 vote, that would be the required majority. The ordinance
That's
passes.
correct, Mayor. That's correct.
Thank you very much. The ordinance has passed. Next on the agenda is a resolution encouraging individuals to wear face coverings in the town of Mount Pleasant, Resolution 20061. Do we have a motion to adopt the resolution?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Considering that if you already have an ordinance, what do you need a resolution for? I'm not sure why we would even discuss this.
I agree.
Agreed, it was on the agenda.
It's a mixed message if you pass it.
Was on the agenda. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hyatt.
I have a question. Now, we limited with the ordinance, places that are important for people to go. The resolution covers everywhere, right?
Yes.
So
there is a
for
difference.
things that we don't want to necessarily demand because they're not necessary, like grocery stores and pharmacies for people, we would like to encourage people to wear masks everywhere in public. I've gone from downtown to Mount Pleasant, driving down the road and not seeing one, and I think it would be good for the town to pass it and encourage people to wear them everywhere without having to demand it everywhere.
Any others?
Good comment.
All right, we will call the question. We'll try to do this by a voice vote. All in favor of adoption of the resolution encouraging individuals to wear a face mask everywhere, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Next item on the agenda is to adjourn. There being nothing further before this council, we will stand adjourned.
Thank you, Laura.